Listen to me. When life becomes heavy, when your chest feels tight, when the world feels too silent and too loud at the same time, you start to believe something is wrong with you. You think you're the only one struggling. You think no one understands. But the truth is this: the mind has seasons, just like nature, and loneliness or sadness is not a sign of weakness. It is a sign that something inside you is calling for attention. You were not meant to stay broken. You were meant to rise. Right now, you're not listening to this by accident. You're here because a part of you knows you can't keep carrying the weight the same way. A part of you is searching for strength, clarity, and a way to feel alive again. And that's exactly what the Stoics mastered: how to remain unshaken even when life feels unbearable. So take a breath. Sit with me for a moment, because in the next few minutes, I'm going to give you the Stoic remedies that will help you break this heavy feeling, lift your mind, and find the strength you forgot you had. 1. Accept your feelings without fighting them. When you feel lonely or depressed, your first instinct is usually to fight the emotion, to push it away, or to pretend that everything is fine. But the more you resist what you feel, the stronger it becomes. Loneliness turns heavier when you try to deny it. Depression becomes deeper when you force yourself to snap out of it instead of understanding it. The Stoics believed that most of our suffering does not come from the emotion itself, but from the judgment we attach to the emotion. We tell ourselves that feeling sad makes us weak, or that feeling empty means something is wrong with us. As soon as you begin to judge your emotions, you create a second layer of pain on top of the first. Acceptance is the opposite of that. It means allowing your emotion to exist without trying to fight it. Instead of telling yourself, "I shouldn't feel this way," you simply acknowledge, "I feel this way right now." This simple shift removes a huge amount of pressure from your mind. It gives you permission to be human. It stops the internal battle that drains your energy and keeps you stuck in the same emotional cycle. When you stop running from your feelings, they lose the power they once had over you, because emotions become louder only when you try to silence them. Think of acceptance like opening a window in a room filled with smoke. The smoke doesn't disappear instantly, but the air slowly becomes clearer because you allowed space for it to move and change. When you accept your emotions, you create that space inside your mind, space to breathe without fear, space to observe what you feel without panicking, space to understand the message behind the emotion, and most importantly, space to begin healing. Acceptance is not giving up. It is not saying, "I guess this is who I am now." It is not surrendering to sadness. It is the first step towards strength. You cannot fix what you refuse to acknowledge. You cannot heal from what you pretend is not hurting you. Acceptance is simply facing the truth of the moment, so you can eventually rise above it with clarity instead of confusion. When you practice acceptance, your emotions stop controlling you. You become the observer, not the victim. And once you reach that point, the loneliness and sadness that once felt overwhelming begin to feel manageable. You take back power that you didn't even realize you had lost. That is why acceptance is the first Stoic remedy. It is the beginning of emotional strength, mental clarity, and inner peace. 2. Separate what you feel from who you are. One of the biggest reasons loneliness and depression feel so heavy is because you start to believe that these emotions define you. When you feel isolated, your mind convinces you that you are an isolated person. When sadness stays for too long, you begin to think you are a sad person. This fusion of identity and emotion is what traps people in cycles of hopelessness. But the Stoics taught a powerful truth. What you feel is not who you are. Your emotions are temporary states of mind. Your identity is something far deeper and more stable. Imagine a passing cloud. It can be dark, heavy, and full of rain, but no matter how long it lingers, it is never the sky itself. The sky remains vast, open, and unbroken beneath every storm. In the same way, your mind is the sky, and your emotions are the passing clouds. They can shade your world for a moment. They can bring storms. They can limit how far you can see, but they never change what you truly are. The real you is calm, stable, and capable, even when your emotions are loud, confusing, and painful. When you separate yourself from your emotions, something powerful happens. You stop taking your emotional state personally. You stop believing the harsh stories your mind tells you. You stop thinking that every negative feeling means you are failing or falling apart. You realize the emotion is only an experience traveling through your awareness. It is not a measurement of your worth. It is not a prediction of your future. It is not a permanent part of your identity. It is simply something you feel in this moment. This separation gives you space to think clearly. Instead of saying, "I am depressed," you learn to say, "I am feeling depressed right now." Instead of saying, "I am lonely," you say, "I am experiencing loneliness at this moment." This small shift changes everything. It reminds you that your emotions are temporary guests. They may stay longer than you want, but they are not permanent residents of your mind. The Stoics believed that the human mind becomes stronger when it learns to observe rather than absorb. When you watch your emotions from a distance, you begin to understand them rather than drown in them. You can see patterns. You can see triggers. You can see which thoughts make the emotions heavier and which thoughts help you rise above them. You gain the ability to respond to your emotions instead of reacting blindly. This separation also protects you from self-blame. You stop telling yourself that you are weak, broken, or failing. You stop judging your entire character based on a temporary emotional wave. You remember that even the strongest people feel lonely sometimes. Even the wisest people experience sadness. Even the most disciplined minds can fall into dark moments. These emotions do not make you flawed, they make you human. When you separate what you feel from who you are, you reclaim your identity. You reconnect with your true self, the part of you that is stable, resilient, and untouched by temporary emotional storms. And once you make this separation, the emotions that once seemed overwhelming lose their power to define your life. You begin to rise above them with clarity, confidence, and strength. 3. Redirect your mind toward what you can control. One of the heaviest burdens during loneliness or depression is the feeling of being powerless. Your mind begins to obsess over things you cannot change, people who walked away, situations that didn't go your way, mistakes you made, opportunities you lost, and moments you wish you could rewrite. These thoughts create a loop that drains your energy and deepens your sadness, because no matter how much you think about these things, you cannot change them. The Stoics taught that suffering multiplies when your attention is trapped in the zone of no control. Peace begins the moment you bring your focus back to the things you can influence. The human mind naturally wanders toward problems, fears, and uncertainties. It loves to replay old memories and imagine worst-case scenarios. When you feel lonely or depressed, this tendency becomes even stronger. You start thinking about who doesn't care, who isn't calling, who isn't showing up for you. You think about what went wrong, what you lack, and why life seems unfair. But none of these thoughts help you feel better. They only keep you trapped in a mental prison built from things that are outside your influence. Stoicism provides a powerful remedy. Shift your attention from what is outside your control to what is inside it. This shift is like turning a light on in a dark room. When you realize that your thoughts, choices, actions, habits, and attitude are always under your control, you begin to feel empowered again. You stop feeling like life is something that happens to you and start seeing it as something you can shape. When your mind starts spiraling into things you can't control, gently bring it back by asking yourself a simple question. What can I do right now that helps me move forward, even in a small way? This question changes everything. It brings your focus out of the past and into the present. It pulls your attention away from fear and toward action. It reminds you that even during emotional storms, you are not helpless. For example, you cannot control who stays in your life, but you can control how you show up for yourself. You cannot control how others treat you, but you can control how you respond. You cannot control the entire future, but you can control what you do today. You cannot control when happiness returns, but you can control the choices that make happiness possible. When you focus on what you can control, your emotional weight becomes lighter. You begin to see progress where there was only pain. You begin to see possibilities where there was only hopelessness. You begin to rebuild your confidence piece by piece, taking control of even one small area: your breathing, your routine, your reactions. Your environment can interrupt the feeling of being stuck. The Stoics believed that control is the foundation of inner peace. If something is outside your influence, let it pass. If something is within your influence, strengthen it. This mindset trains your brain to seek solutions instead of problems, actions instead of excuses, clarity instead of confusion. Over time, this shift reduces anxiety, lifts your mood, and helps you regain a sense of direction. Redirecting your mind is not about ignoring your pain. It is about choosing not to drown in what you cannot change, and choosing instead to build your stability on what you can. This is how the Stoics regained their power in times of difficulty, and this is how you can regain yours. 4. Turn your loneliness into a tool for self-mastery. Most people see loneliness as something purely negative, a sign that something is wrong with them or that their life isn't moving in the right direction. But the Stoics viewed loneliness differently. They saw it as an opportunity, a rare moment when the noise of the world fades, allowing you to finally hear your own thoughts clearly. When everything becomes quiet around you, the truth inside you becomes louder. The uncomfortable silence that loneliness brings is actually a doorway to self-mastery if you choose to walk through it. Loneliness exposes areas of your life that need attention. It reveals the wounds you haven't healed, the habits you've been avoiding, the goals you postponed, the relationship you have with yourself. When you are surrounded by noise, distractions, and people, you don't notice these things. You don't see your weaknesses clearly. You don't see your unmet needs or your hidden inner strength. But solitude forces you to face the parts of yourself that you often push away. And facing yourself honestly is the first step to becoming mentally stronger. The Stoics used solitude as training. They didn't see being alone as a punishment. They saw it as a chance to sharpen their mind, strengthen their spirit, and reconnect with their values. They believed that a person who cannot sit calmly with themselves will never truly be free, because they will always depend on something outside of them for peace. When you learn to be comfortable in your own company, you take back a level of power that cannot be taken away by anyone or anything. Turning loneliness into self-mastery means using your alone time with intention instead of fear. Instead of sitting with sadness and overthinking, you begin using this time to build yourself. You start reading books that nourish your mind, learning skills that improve your life, organizing your thoughts, planning your future, and healing from old emotional patterns that once controlled you. When you use loneliness as fuel for growth, you transform what once felt painful into something meaningful. During loneliness, your mind becomes highly sensitive. You notice your thoughts more clearly. You become aware of your insecurities, your desires, your disappointments, and your hopes. This awareness can either break you or rebuild you. It depends on how you handle it. Instead of letting loneliness push you into self-doubt, use that awareness to improve your emotional discipline. Notice which thoughts drain you, which memories you keep revisiting, which fears keep repeating. Then start replacing them with thoughts that strengthen you, thoughts about who you want to become, what you truly value, and what your life could look like if you committed fully to your growth. Self-mastery also means learning not to rely on others for validation. Loneliness teaches you that you don't always need someone beside you to feel complete. It teaches you how to generate your own peace, your own confidence, your own meaning. A person who learns to find strength within themselves becomes unshakable, because their stability doesn't depend on who shows up or who leaves. It becomes internally created, not externally borrowed. As you work on yourself during these quiet moments, you'll notice something strange. The loneliness becomes lighter. You begin to enjoy your own presence. You begin to feel more focused, more stable, and more connected to your true priorities. Your mind becomes calmer. Your heart becomes wiser. You start trusting yourself more. What once felt like an emotional storm becomes a period of transformation. Loneliness becomes dangerous only when you do nothing with it. But when you use it as a tool for self-mastery, it becomes one of the most powerful phases of your life. It becomes the moment you grow stronger than your past, clearer than your fears, and more disciplined than your excuses. The Stoics understood this deeply, and once you understand it too, your loneliness will stop feeling like an enemy and start feeling like a teacher. 5. Challenge the thoughts that make you suffer. When you feel lonely or depressed, the biggest battle is not happening outside you, it's happening inside your mind. Your thoughts begin to twist reality, exaggerate fears, highlight your weaknesses, and repeat old stories that were never true in the first place. The Stoics believed that the mind can be your greatest ally or your most destructive enemy, depending on whether you learn to question it. When you are feeling down, your mind becomes loud and dramatic, often telling you stories that make the pain feel worse than it actually is. This is why one of the most powerful remedies is learning to challenge your thoughts instead of accepting them blindly. When your mind is in a low state, it tends to produce thoughts that are absolute, extreme, and emotionally charged. You might find yourself thinking things like, "No one cares about me," or "I will feel like this forever," or "I am not good enough for anyone." These thoughts feel real, because they come from your mind, but that doesn't make them true. A thought is only a thought. It becomes powerful only when you decide to believe it. The Stoics taught that before you trust any negative thought, you must question it. You must examine it the way a wise judge examines a claim, with calmness, clarity, and evidence. For example, when your mind tells you that no one cares, pause and ask, is this a fact or just a feeling? Feelings are temporary, emotional, and often influenced by your mood. Facts are stable and consistent. Most of your painful thoughts are feelings disguised as facts. When you question them, their power starts to break apart. You begin to see that your mind is not always telling you the truth. It is telling you its interpretation of the moment, shaped by sadness, loneliness, or exhaustion. Another common destructive thought is, this feeling will never end. But look back at your life. Every emotional storm you've ever experienced eventually passed. Every pain you thought you couldn't survive, you survived. Every heartbreak, every disappointment, every dark period you went through, all of it, and came out stronger. When you remind yourself of this, you are challenging the lie your mind tells you. You are reminding yourself that emotions come in waves. None of them stay forever. Challenging your thoughts doesn't mean arguing with your mind aggressively. It means observing your thoughts with curiosity instead of fear. When a painful thought shows up, don't run from it, and don't instantly believe it. Simply ask yourself questions like, is this the only possible explanation? What evidence do I have? Would I say this about someone I love? If this thought was spoken by a friend, how would I respond? What would be a more balanced way to look at this situation? These questions interrupt the emotional spiral. They slow down your thoughts long enough for logic to enter. They remind you that your mind can be influenced by stress, fatigue, and fear. And once you separate thought from truth, you give yourself freedom. You stop drowning in mental illusions and start seeing reality more clearly. The Stoics believed that thoughts are like visitors entering your home. You cannot always control who knocks on your door, but you can absolutely choose who you allow inside. Not every thought deserves your attention. Not every thought deserves your belief. Not every thought deserves to live in your mind rent-free. Some thoughts should be acknowledged, understood, and then gently let go. Others should be firmly rejected because they are rooted in fear, insecurity, or past pain, not in truth. When you develop the habit of questioning your negative thoughts, your inner world begins to change. You start feeling lighter because you are no longer carrying the weight of false beliefs. You start feeling stronger because you are no longer controlled by automatic reactions. You start feeling more hopeful because you realize that your thoughts are not permanent truths, they are temporary mental events. This is one of the greatest forms of self-mastery. It is how you stop your mind from becoming your enemy. It is how you prevent small, painful thoughts from growing into overwhelming suffering. And the more you do it, the more you build a mind that supports you instead of sabotaging you. In the Stoic view, freedom does not come from changing your circumstances. It comes from changing your relationship with your thoughts. When you challenge the thoughts that make you suffer, you reclaim your power from the inside. You stop living inside emotional illusions and start living inside truth. And truth, even when it is difficult, is always lighter than fear. 6. Create a daily structure to protect your mental health. When you are lonely or depressed, your mind becomes a place where everything feels too heavy, too complicated, too out of control. Your thoughts scatter in different directions, your emotions fluctuate without warning, and even simple tasks begin to feel overwhelming. During these moments, discipline and structure are not just productive habits, they become lifelines. Stoics believed that a person who does not control their routine eventually becomes controlled by their emotions, their impulses, and their circumstances. Structure gives you stability when your inner world feels chaotic. It becomes the anchor that prevents you from drifting into darker and darker mental waters. Modern life feeds chaos. Notifications, messages, comparisons, temptations, pressures, distractions. All of these keep your mind constantly stimulated and constantly exhausted. When you feel depressed or lonely, your brain becomes even more vulnerable to this chaos. You lose your sense of direction. You begin waking up late. You avoid responsibilities. You stop eating well. You abandon exercise. You scroll endlessly. You fall into patterns that drain your energy rather than restore it. The Stoics believed that the mind cannot heal properly when the environment is disorganized or when the routine is unstable. Without structure, sadness grows deeper, loneliness becomes louder, and simple problems begin to feel impossible. This is why one of the most powerful remedies for emotional suffering is to create a daily structure, something predictable, something steady, something you can rely on, even when your emotions are unpredictable. Structure gives you something to hold on to when everything else feels uncertain. It creates small victories throughout your day that rebuild your confidence piece by piece. The Stoics understood that feelings follow actions, not the other way around. You cannot sit and wait for motivation to appear before you take action. You act first, and motivation follows. You move first, and clarity follows. You take control of small things, and slowly, life becomes manageable again. A structured day does not need to be complicated or filled with unrealistic tasks. It needs to be simple, consistent, and aligned with what strengthens you. Wake up at the same time every day. This tiny decision alone resets your mind. It creates a rhythm. It signals to your brain that you are taking responsibility for your life again. When you wake up consistently, your mind becomes less foggy, your body becomes more regulated, and your thoughts stop drifting as wildly as before. Movement should be another part of your structure. The Stoics valued physical strength because they understood it was directly connected to mental clarity. You don't need intense workouts. You need movement. A walk outside, a light workout, stretching, anything that gets your body moving. When your body moves, your emotions move. When your body is still for too long, depression grows heavier. Exercise is not about changing your body, it is about freeing your mind. Movement releases emotional toxins that your thoughts alone cannot handle. It pulls you out of your mental storms and reconnects you with the present moment. Another essential part of structure is intentional eating. When you are depressed, you either overeat or forget to eat. When you feel lonely, food becomes comfort or becomes irrelevant. But your brain relies heavily on your eating patterns. Poor eating habits make negative emotions stronger. Clean, simple eating stabilizes your mood and increases your mental strength. The Stoics taught moderation, not perfection. Eat in a way that supports your mind rather than sabotages it. Create a routine around your environment as well. A clean room creates a clean mind. A chaotic, messy space creates mental noise, whether you realize it or not. When you are lonely or depressed, Even cleaning your room feels like a mountain. But once you do it, the emotional relief is immediate. Putting your surroundings in order gives you a sense of control that loneliness often steals from you. You begin to feel capable again. You begin to feel like you can handle things again. Your room becomes a reflection of your mind, and as you clean it, your mental fog begins to lift. Your structure should also include time away from digital noise. Depression thrives in silence, but anxiety thrives in overstimulation. Loneliness becomes heavier when you scroll through endless highlight reels of other people's lives. You begin comparing your worst days with their best moments, forgetting that what you see is filtered, edited, and not representative of real life. Cutting down digital noise, even for 1 or 2 hours a day, gives your mind space to recover. It reduces anxiety. It reduces the mental pressure that social media secretly builds. It helps you reconnect with yourself instead of constantly consuming others. Another crucial part of structure is setting small goals. When you are depressed or lonely, big goals feel impossible. They overwhelm you. They make you feel even more stuck. But small goals, tiny accomplishments give your brain a sense of progress. And progress, even in small amounts, builds hope. Make your goals simple and doable. Drink water, take a walk, read 1 page, clean 1 corner, complete 1 important task. These small actions seem meaningless in the moment, but over time they rebuild your inner strength. Every small task completed is a reminder that you are still capable, still moving forward, still in control. The Stoics believed that discipline builds freedom. A structured day reduces emotional chaos because it reduces room for randomness. Depression and loneliness grow stronger in empty, unstructured time. They feed on inactivity. They grow in silence and stillness. When you have a routine, you create momentum. And once momentum begins, even slowly, your emotions start shifting. You no longer feel stuck because your days are no longer empty. You no longer feel powerless because your actions prove that you can still shape your life. Structure also protects you from becoming a prisoner of your emotions. Without structure, you allow your feelings to decide your actions. If you wake up sad, you stay in bed. If you feel unmotivated, you avoid everything. If you feel lonely, you retreat deeper. But with structure, your actions are no longer dictated by how you feel. You become consistent even when your emotions are inconsistent. This is the essence of Stoic discipline, acting based on values, not moods. When you maintain structure even on hard days, your mind begins to trust you again. You prove to yourself that you are reliable, capable, and stronger than your emotional storms. Over time, structure becomes a form of self-respect. It becomes proof that you value yourself enough to care for your mind, your body, and your future. Even if your routine is simple, even if your actions are small, you are building a foundation that protects your mental health. You are teaching your mind that it is safe, stable, and supported. And this stability reduces anxiety, softens sadness, and slowly begins to fill the emptiness inside you. The beauty of structure is that it doesn't require motivation. It only requires consistency. You don't need to feel strong to start. You don't need to feel inspired. You don't need to wait for a better mood, a better day, or a better life. You start where you are, with what you have, and you let the routine carry you forward. Little by little, the routine becomes familiar. Familiarity becomes comfort. Comfort becomes strength, and strength becomes healing. The Stoics understood that the mind is not something you control once, it is something you guide daily. Structure is the tool that guides your mind gently but firmly in the right direction. It makes sure you don't lose yourself in your emotions. It gives you something stable when everything inside you feels unstable. It becomes the quiet force that keeps you grounded, disciplined, and slowly but surely emotionally healed. When you build structure into your life, you are not just organizing your day, you are reorganizing your mind. You are creating order where there was chaos. You are creating clarity where there was confusion. You are creating strength where there was weakness. And eventually, you look at yourself and realize that the loneliness you once feared has become the very environment where you rebuilt your life. 7. Remember that pain is a season, not a life sentence. One of the most dangerous things that happens when you feel lonely or depressed is that your mind begins to convince you that this feeling is permanent. You start to believe that the heaviness you feel today will follow you forever. You start to think that your motivation will never return, that your joy has disappeared permanently, that your future will always look like the painful moment you're in right now. But the Stoics repeatedly taught that nothing in life is permanent, not emotions, not circumstances, not situations, not even suffering. Everything moves, everything shifts, everything cycles. What hurts today becomes manageable tomorrow. What feels impossible now becomes something you overcome and eventually grow from. Pain is a season, not a life sentence, and understanding this truth can save you from drowning in emotions that were never meant to last forever. When you feel depressed, your internal world slows down. Your sense of time becomes distorted. Hours feel like days, days feel like weeks, and weeks feel like a never-ending cycle of the same sadness. Your mind becomes trapped in a fog where you cannot see beyond the present moment. This is why depression feels so suffocating, not because the emotion itself is unbearable, but because your mind cannot imagine a future where the emotion is gone. That is the illusion of suffering. It convinces you that this moment defines your entire life. The Stoics understood this illusion deeply. They believed that the mind exaggerates both pain and permanence, especially during times of emotional turbulence. But no emotional experience, no matter how heavy, has the power to last forever. One of the most powerful remedies is to remind yourself that your emotions do not follow logic. They follow cycles. Just like the weather changes, just like seasons come and go, just like tides rise and fall, your emotional state also moves through phases. There will be days when the fog is thick and you struggle to see any hope. But there will also be days when the fog lifts, even slightly, and you begin to feel the return of clarity, strength, or even small moments of peace. These tiny improvements often go unnoticed because the mind focuses more on what hurts than what heals. But if you look closely, you will see signs of change, moments where your mind feels lighter, moments where you laugh without expecting to, moments where you feel a spark of curiosity or motivation again. These moments are proof that pain does not stay still. It moves, it shifts, it loosens its grip over time. The Stoics believed that every emotional struggle carries a hidden message. Pain becomes a teacher that exposes what you need to heal. Loneliness becomes a guide that reveals the relationship you have with yourself. Depression slows your life down so you can finally see the things you've been avoiding or suppressing. These experiences are not punishments, they are signals. They push you toward growth, reflection, and self-understanding. If they were permanent, They could not teach you anything. The fact that they come and go is what allows them to shape you in powerful ways. The Stoics saw suffering as a sculptor. It breaks away the unnecessary parts of you and reveals a stronger, clearer version underneath. When you understand pain as a temporary season, you stop identifying with it. You no longer say, "I am broken." Instead, you say, "I am passing through a difficult chapter." You no longer say, "This is my whole life now." Instead, you say, "This is a moment I am experiencing, not a permanent reality." This separation between you and your pain gives you emotional space. And emotional space is what allows healing to begin. When you believe your suffering is temporary, you create hope. And hope, even in small amounts, is enough to keep you moving forward. It is enough to keep you alive inside. It is enough to remind you that you will not always feel the way you feel right now. Every person on this planet has gone through moments where they believed their pain would never end. And yet, every person has also experienced the truth that it eventually does. Think back to the hardest moments of your life. At the time, they felt unbearable. You probably thought you would never recover. You probably thought you would never feel like yourself again. And yet, somehow, you did. You healed, you grew, you adapted, you found new strength, new direction, new meaning. The same process will happen again, even if your mind cannot see it yet. The Stoics believed that strength is not measured by how many times you avoid suffering, but by how many times you outlast it. To outlast pain, you must first understand it is not forever. You must speak to yourself with patience. You must treat your healing like a long journey rather than a race. The mind becomes calm when it stops demanding instant change and begins trusting the natural pace of emotional recovery. Healing is slow, subtle, and often invisible in the moment, but it is always happening beneath the surface. Just because you do not feel progress does not mean progress is not occurring. Broken bones heal quietly. Emotional wounds heal the same way. When you feel lonely or depressed, remind yourself of this simple truth. Nothing in life remains still. Not the seasons, not the oceans, not the stars, not your emotions. What you are feeling right now, no matter how heavy, scary, or painful, will eventually shift. It will soften. It will weaken. It will fade. You will not always wake up with this weight on your chest. You will not always carry this emptiness in your heart. You will not always be trapped in thoughts that feel overwhelming. There will come a day, perhaps sooner than you expect, when you will look back and wonder how something that once felt so impossible became just another part of your story, something you survived. The Stoics often practiced imagining themselves in the future, looking back at their current suffering. They asked themselves, will this matter in 1 year, 5 years, 10 years? This practice creates emotional distance. It lifts your mind out of the present fog and places it in a clearer future where the pain has already passed. When you imagine yourself looking back, you realize the suffering does not define your life. It only defines this moment. And moments change. Suffering becomes dangerous only when you start believing it is your identity. But when you recognize it as temporary, you regain the ability to endure it. Endurance is a form of power. It is the silent strength that grows every time you choose not to give up. The Stoics believed that enduring difficult seasons builds a stronger character than any amount of comfort ever could. When you survive emotional winters, you step into future seasons with greater wisdom, deeper compassion, and a stronger mind. You become someone who knows how to stand firm even when life feels unbearable. When you remind yourself that pain is temporary, you are not denying your struggle. You are grounding yourself in reality. You are giving yourself the mental strength to keep moving, even if your steps are slow. You are giving yourself the patience to experience healing without rushing it. You are giving yourself the perspective to see that this is only one chapter, not the entire book. The truth is, you have already survived everything life has thrown at you so far. Every heartbreak, every disappointment, every moment when you thought you couldn't go on, you outlived all of them. This moment is no different. It will pass. You will heal. You will grow. You will rise again. The night does not last forever, and neither does emotional darkness. The sun always returns, even if the clouds hide it for a while. Your pain is a season of reflection, a season of growth, a season of transformation. It may feel endless, but it is moving, changing, evolving every day. And one day, you will wake up lighter, clearer, and stronger than before. Not because the pain disappeared magically, but because you learned to survive it with patience, understanding, and inner strength. This is the Stoic truth. You are not your suffering. You are the one who outlasts it. 8. Strengthen your inner dialogue. The way you speak to yourself determines your entire emotional reality. One of the most overlooked causes of loneliness and depression is the way you speak to yourself when no one else is listening. Your inner dialogue, the quiet voice in your mind, shapes your emotions, your confidence, your belief in yourself, and your entire perception of life. The Stoics knew that the greatest battlefield is not the world outside, but the conversations happening inside your own mind. They understood that a person could appear calm on the outside, but be fighting a brutal war internally. When you are feeling lonely or depressed, this inner voice becomes even louder, and unfortunately, it often becomes harsher, more critical, and more destructive. And because the voice is your own, you trust it fully, even when it is lying to you. For many people, their inner dialogue becomes their biggest enemy. When you make a mistake, the voice punishes you. When someone leaves your life, the voice blames you. When you feel empty, the voice tells you that something is wrong with you. When you feel depressed, the voice convinces you that you are weak. When things go wrong, the voice tells you that it's all your fault. This constant negative self-talk traps you in cycles of suffering because you begin to believe the things you repeatedly tell yourself. The Stoics taught that the mind must be trained just like the body. You cannot expect emotional stability if your inner voice constantly attacks your worth, repeats negative beliefs, or reinforces your fears. The first step in strengthening your inner dialogue is awareness. Most people speak to themselves in ways they would never speak to anyone they care about. They use harsh, unforgiving language toward themselves, and they don't even realize they're doing it. When something goes wrong, the first thing their mind says is, "I'm so stupid," or "Why do I always mess up?" or "No one wants me anyway." These thoughts feel automatic, but they are not inevitable. They are learned patterns, stories your mind repeats because it has heard them so many times before. Loneliness amplifies these patterns because when you are alone, there is no external voice to contradict them. Depression strengthens them because your brain becomes more sensitive to negative information and less responsive to positive evidence. The Stoics believed that your inner voice should behave like a wise mentor, not a bully. It should guide you forward, not push you down. It should remind you of your strength, not highlight your weaknesses. It should help you grow, not punish you for being human. When your inner dialogue becomes kind, rational, and stable, your emotional world becomes calmer and more resilient. You transform from someone who collapses under pressure into someone who stands firm, even when life feels unbearable. To strengthen your inner dialogue, you must first catch the negative thoughts that arise in moments of emotional pain. They usually appear quickly and instinctively. You may not even notice them, but they shape your feelings immediately. Thoughts like, "I'm alone because I'm not good enough," "Nothing will ever get better," "People leave me because I'm not worthy," "I can't handle this," or "I'm just broken," are not reflections of reality. They are reflections of your emotional state. When you're sad, your mind tells sad stories. When you're tired, your mind tells hopeless stories. When you're anxious, your mind tells fearful stories. The content of your thoughts changes depending on how you feel. This is why the Stoics taught that you should not trust your thoughts blindly, especially during moments of emotional distress. The second step is to respond to these thoughts with reason, patience, and self-compassion. This does not mean replacing every negative thought with unrealistic positivity. Stoicism is not about lying to yourself. It is about grounding yourself in truth. When your mind says, "You will always feel this way," the rational response is, "I have felt this way before, and it passed. This will pass too." When your mind says, "I am alone because no one cares," the compassionate response is, "I am going through a difficult time, and it's okay to feel alone, but it doesn't mean I am unloved." When your mind says, "I am failing at life," the grounded response is, "I am struggling right now, but struggling does not mean failing." Everyone goes through difficult chapters. You must speak to yourself like someone you are responsible for protecting. The Stoics believed that self-compassion is a form of strength, not weakness. It is not about excusing your mistakes. It is about understanding them. It is not about denying your pain. It is about supporting yourself through it. Your inner dialogue should be the voice that lifts you up when the rest of the world feels like it is falling apart. It should be the voice that encourages you to keep moving, even when your emotions weigh you down. Another important aspect of strengthening your inner dialogue is reducing the language of extremity. Depression and loneliness often make you think in absolutes. Always, never, forever, everyone, no one. These words distort your perception and make your suffering appear bigger and more permanent than it truly is. The Stoics taught that moderation in thinking is essential for emotional balance. Instead of saying, "I will always feel this way," say, "I feel this way right now, and that's okay." Instead of saying, "Everyone abandons me," say, "Some people have left, but not everyone will." Instead of saying, "I can't do anything," say, "I am overwhelmed, but I can take one small step." This shift may seem small, but it changes how your brain processes your emotions. It softens the weight of the moment. It brings clarity where there was confusion. Strengthening your inner dialogue also means recognizing that your mind is deeply influenced by your environment, your physical state, and your habits. If you are sleep-deprived, your thoughts become more negative. If your diet is poor, your mood declines. If you isolate yourself completely, your mind turns inward in unhealthy ways. If you consume constant negativity through social media or news, your inner dialogue absorbs that negativity. You cannot expect your inner voice to be calm if everything around you is chaotic. You cannot expect your self-talk to be healthy if you constantly feed your mind unhealthy information. The Stoics believed in protecting the mind the same way you protect a valuable possession. You guard it from harmful influences. You limit exposure to negativity. You choose what thoughts you allow to enter and what thoughts you let go. Another element of strengthening your inner dialogue is building a vocabulary that empowers you. Instead of saying, "I can't," say, "I'm learning." Instead of saying, "I'm broken," say, "I'm healing." Instead of saying, "I failed," say, "I am improving." These shifts are not about pretending everything is perfect. They are about guiding your mind toward growth instead of despair. Words have power. The way you speak to yourself shapes your identity and your emotional resilience. There is also the Stoic practice of giving yourself neutral statements instead of emotional ones. When things go wrong, instead of saying, "Why does this always happen to me?" the Stoic mind says, "This is what happened. What can I do next?" Neutral statements remove drama from the moment. They prevent emotional exaggeration. They bring you back to clarity and action. Over time, thinking neutrally becomes a habit, and you stop reacting to life with panic or self-blame. You begin responding with wisdom. The Stoics also practiced gratitude, not the shallow kind that ignores problems, but the deep kind that reminds you of what is still meaningful in your life, even during suffering. Gratitude strengthens your inner dialogue because it shifts your focus from what is missing to what remains. When you remind yourself of the good, your inner voice becomes more balanced. It stops viewing life through a lens of despair and begins viewing it through a lens of possibility. Finally, strengthening your inner dialogue means learning to comfort yourself the way you wish someone else would comfort you. When you're lonely, your inner voice can remind you that you are still worthy of love. When you're afraid, your inner voice can remind you that you have survived every fear before this one. When you're sad, your inner voice can remind you that you are not alone in your experience. When you feel lost, your inner voice can remind you that clarity will return. This is the ultimate Stoic remedy, becoming the voice you need to hear. Because if the voice inside you becomes strong, wise, patient, and compassionate, no amount of loneliness can break you. No amount of depression can control you. No emotional storm can overpower you. The world may fall silent around you, but the strength of your inner voice will keep you grounded, steady, and moving forward. A strong inner dialogue does not eliminate pain, but it transforms how you face it. It turns suffering into learning. It turns fear into patience. It turns loneliness into reflection. It turns emotional storms into tests that shape you into someone wiser, stronger, and more resilient than before. Your inner dialogue is the foundation on which your entire emotional life sits. Strengthen the foundation, and everything built on top of it becomes stronger. This is one of the most powerful Stoic truths. When you master the way you speak to yourself, you master your mind. And when you master your mind, you master your life. 9. Rebuild your life through small, consistent actions, not through sudden transformations. When you feel lonely or depressed, your mind convinces you that your whole life needs a massive overhaul. It tells you that everything is wrong, that nothing is working, that you need some dramatic transformation to escape your suffering. But the Stoics taught a very different truth, one that feels counterintuitive at first, yet becomes deeply liberating once you understand it. Your life doesn't change through grand, sudden actions. It changes through small, steady steps, tiny movements, quiet improvements, small disciplines repeated every single day. This is the path out of loneliness. This is the path out of depression, not through explosions of motivation, but through gentle, consistent effort that slowly rebuilds your strength. When you're lonely, your mind becomes impatient. It wants big solutions. It wants instant relief. It wants everything to change today. It wants answers, direction, clarity, purpose, all at once. And when your life doesn't shift immediately, you begin to sink deeper into hopelessness, believing you are stuck forever. This is the trap of emotional suffering, the belief that your healing requires a big, dramatic breakthrough. But healing rarely looks dramatic. It looks slow. It looks subtle. It looks almost invisible in the moment. Most of your progress will be so small that it will not feel like progress at all. But it is. Stoicism teaches that the smallest action is always more powerful than the biggest intention. Thinking about getting better will not get you better. Wishing for change will not create change. Wanting a new life will not build a new life. The only thing that works is action, small action, taken consistently, even when you don't feel strong, even when you don't feel motivated, even when your emotions feel heavy. Especially then, because the smallest step taken during the darkest moments becomes 10 times more powerful than a big step taken when you feel fine. When your mind is overwhelmed, your life becomes difficult because everything looks big. Cleaning your room feels like climbing a mountain. Replying to a message feels impossible. Showering feels like a challenge. Going outside feels terrifying. Making a plan feels pointless. Everything becomes heavier than it should be. Depression magnifies tasks. Loneliness magnifies fear. Your emotional world shrinks your ability to act. But that doesn't mean you cannot act, it only means you must start smaller. The Stoics believed that small actions build strength because they are achievable. They create momentum, and momentum is how a human being rebuilds themselves from the ground up. When you feel like your life is falling apart, the goal is not to rebuild it overnight. The goal is to make one small improvement, one corner cleaned, one glass of water, one walk, one page read, one step taken. These actions seem insignificant from the outside, but internally, they are reconstructing your identity. Each small action says to your mind, I am still capable. And the mind believes whatever you prove to it through action. The truth is, depression steals your sense of self. Loneliness steals your sense of direction. You begin to feel disconnected not only from the world, but from yourself. You lose trust in your abilities. You lose belief in your strengths. You begin to forget the person you once were. You begin to forget your potential. That is why small actions matter so much. They rebuild the bridge between who you are right now and who you can become again. The Stoics knew that no one rises all at once. You rise slowly, through repeated small acts of courage. You rise by doing one thing today that your future self will thank you for. You rise by choosing discipline over despair in the smallest moments. You rise by making life just 1% better each day. People underestimate this truth because it is quiet. It is not glamorous. It does not look powerful. But the people who change their lives are not the ones who wait for motivation. They are the ones who take action even when they have none. Consider a person who has lost everything: direction, purpose, confidence, energy. A big plan will overwhelm them. A big strategy will crush them. A big transformation will discourage them before they begin. But a small action, a simple daily habit like waking up at the same time, cleaning one spot, walking for 10 minutes, drinking water, reading one page, can anchor them. It can give them structure, and structure creates stability. Stability creates confidence. Confidence creates momentum, and momentum creates transformation. But the transformation does not appear all at once, and that's why many people never reach it. They quit because progress feels too slow. They expect emotional transformation to feel loud and obvious, but real healing is subtle. The small steps you take today may not feel like they matter, but each one is planting a seed. These seeds grow quietly beneath the surface until one day you look back and realize you are no longer the same person. Your loneliness softened, your sadness lifted, your mind became clearer. You reclaimed strength without noticing the moment it returned. Stoics understood that small actions are powerful because they bypass emotional resistance. When you try to make big changes, your emotions fight you. When you try to do something small, your emotions do not resist as strongly. This is why one small step becomes the doorway to the next step, and the next, and eventually to a new life. Discipline grows the same way a muscle grows: slowly, consistently, quietly, with repetition. And here's the deeper truth. Small actions build a new identity. Every time you complete something, even something tiny, you send a message to your subconscious. You are telling yourself, "I can do this." And once your mind starts believing that you can do small things, it begins to believe that you can do big things. This is how people regain self-confidence after emotional collapse. Not through big victories, but through small wins repeated until the mind remembers its own strength. When you are depressed or lonely, your mind becomes full of negative predictions. What's the point? Nothing will change. I will fail again. I don't have the energy. These thoughts stop you from acting on big goals, but they cannot stop you from acting on small ones. When you take a small step, you break the cycle. You interrupt the voice of hopelessness. You show your mind that effort still exists within you. You show it that change is possible. You weaken the power of despair. The Stoics understood that the mind needs proof, not promises. It needs experience, not theory. When you act, even in a small way, you give your mind the proof it needs to believe in your future. This is why they taught that self-respect is built through consistent action. When your actions align with your intentions, even in micro form, your inner world becomes stronger. Another important Stoic lesson is that small actions protect you from sinking deeper. When you stop acting, even for a few days, your mental state declines quickly. You lose your rhythm. You lose your sense of capability. You lose your connection to life. This is why doing nothing feels comfortable at first but devastating afterward. The Stoics believed that inactivity was the gateway to emotional suffering. Loneliness becomes heavier when your days have no structure. Depression becomes darker when your actions disappear. Small actions prevent this downward spiral. And these actions do not have to be productive. They can be nourishing. Sitting outside in the sun is an action. Taking a warm shower is an action. Cleaning your desk is an action. Journaling your thoughts is an action. Calling someone is an action. Watering plants is an action. Cooking a simple meal is an action. None of these will fix your life instantly, but all of them contribute to rebuilding your foundation. The Stoics also taught that your responsibility is not to heal instantly, but to move honestly. Healing is not linear. You will have days where your small actions feel easy, and days where they feel impossible. There will be days where the loneliness returns heavily, where depression tries to suffocate your progress. But this does not erase your efforts. Your job is to return to the next step, even if you took 10 steps backward. The Stoic path is not perfection, it is persistence. Small actions matter because they rebuild trust in yourself. They remind you that you are capable of movement, capable of change, capable of surviving. When your life feels broken, these tiny movements become the glue that slowly puts things back together. You will not see it immediately. You might not see it for weeks. But each small step is stitching your strength back to your soul. And here is the most Stoic truth of all. Small actions reveal how powerful you truly are, because they succeed even when you are weak. Anyone can take big actions on a good day, but only the strong can take the smallest step when they feel empty. Only the strong can move even 1 inch forward when their emotions tell them to give up. That is the essence of Stoic resilience. Your life is not rebuilt through miracles or motivation. It is rebuilt through small, steady, consistent actions that slowly bring you back to yourself. The small step you take today is more powerful than the big step you plan to take someday. A small action done consistently is more transformative than a big action done once. This is how you rise. This is how you heal. This is how you escape loneliness and depression, not through sudden breakthroughs, but through the quiet, steady rebuilding of your inner strength, moment by moment, day by day, step by step. 10. Reconnect with the present moment, because most of your suffering lives in either the past or the future. One of the greatest truths the Stoics understood is that human suffering rarely comes from what is happening right now. It comes from the stories we tell ourselves about the past and the fears we project into the future. When you feel lonely, your mind often drifts backward, searching through old memories, heartbreaks, disappointments, betrayals, and painful moments you can't change. When you feel depressed, your mind jumps forward, imagining everything that could go wrong, everything you might lose, everything that might fail. This constant mental time traveling pulls you away from the present moment, the only place where healing, clarity, and peace truly exist. And the more you leave the present, the worse your emotional suffering becomes. The Stoics believed that the present moment is the foundation of inner peace. It is where life actually happens. It is where your true power lies. But the problem is that loneliness and depression distort your perception of time. They make the past feel closer and heavier than it really is. They make the future feel darker and more threatening than it actually will be. They rob you of your connection to the now, leaving you mentally trapped in places that no longer exist. When your mind becomes consumed by memories or fears, your suffering multiplies, not because the pain is real, but because your imagination intensifies it. To reconnect with the present moment, you must first understand how much of your emotional weight comes from thoughts, not reality. Think about how many times you felt lonely, not because you were physically alone, but because of thoughts about who isn't there. Think about how many times you felt depressed, not because something bad was happening right now, but because your mind was imagining an overwhelming future. Most suffering is mental, not situational. The Stoics knew this, and they trained themselves to bring their mind back to the present moment whenever emotions began to spiral. Being present does not mean ignoring your past or pretending the future doesn't matter. It means refusing to let your mind drag you into worlds that hurt you. The present moment is usually far more manageable than the stories created by your fears and memories. For example, if you are sitting in your room feeling lonely, the loneliness intensifies not because of the silence around you, but because your mind begins to bring up old heartbreaks, old friendships that faded, old wounds, old disappointments. Those are not happening now, they are echoes. If you feel depressed about the future, your suffering grows because your mind imagines worst-case scenarios, failures, embarrassments, losses, and endless difficulties. But none of these are happening now, they are predictions. The Stoics believed that the mind becomes dangerous when it is not anchored in the present. They observed that even in moments of peace, the mind can create storms. Even in moments of calm, the mind can create fear. Even in moments of possibility, the mind can create despair. This is why emotional suffering often feels disproportionate to your actual life circumstances. Your mind is fighting ghosts from the past or monsters from the future. Neither are real. One of the most powerful practices you can develop is to ask yourself, what is wrong right now, in this exact moment? Not yesterday, not tomorrow, not in your imagination, not in your fears. Right now, in this exact second, what is wrong? Usually, the answer is nothing. You are breathing. You are alive. You are safe. The room around you is calm. There is no immediate threat. There is no danger. The suffering exists mainly in your mind. When you realize this, the emotional intensity begins to soften, because the mind can no longer convince you that your thoughts are your reality. Reconnecting with the present is not about forcing positivity or pretending everything is perfect. It is about grounding yourself in what is real. It is about returning to the truth of this moment, instead of getting trapped in mental time loops. When you return to now, your breathing slows, your heart rate stabilizes, your thoughts quiet down, your emotions begin to settle, the mind becomes clearer, the fog lifts, even slightly. This clarity makes loneliness less suffocating and depression less overwhelming. The Stoics practiced presence through observation. They would focus on the smallest details of the moment, the sensation of breathing, the feeling of the ground beneath their feet, the temperature of the air, the light in the room, the movement of their hands, the sound around them. This practice anchored them to the now and prevented their minds from spiraling. They understood that the body is always present, but the mind rarely is. To heal emotionally, the mind must learn to stay where the body is. Presence also helps you break the cycle of overthinking. When you are focused on the present, you cannot simultaneously obsess over what went wrong or fear what might go wrong. You cannot deeply feel gratitude and panic at the same time. You cannot feel fully grounded in the moment and fully consumed by anxiety at the same time. This is why being present becomes a medicine for the suffering mind. It interrupts the mental patterns that fuel your loneliness and depression. Another powerful Stoic teaching is that the present moment is always manageable because it is always small. But the past is huge, the future is infinite. Your mind cannot handle huge or infinite things when it is already emotionally fragile. The present moment breaks life into small pieces that you can handle one breath at a time. This is why people who feel overwhelmed often experience relief when someone tells them, just focus on today, or even just focus on the next hour. When you shrink life into a manageable time frame, emotional suffering becomes lighter. You regain control. The Stoics believed that most fears disappear when examined in the present. For example, if you fear being alone forever, the present moment shows you that right now you are simply sitting quietly, not doomed, not abandoned forever, just sitting. If you fear failure, the present moment shows you that right now you are safe and capable of taking one small step. If you fear judgment, the present moment shows you that right now no one is judging you. You are imagining their thoughts. When you return to the present, fear loses its foundation, sadness loses its weight, anxiety loses its fuel. Reconnecting with the present also stops you from romanticizing the past or catastrophizing the future. Loneliness often intensifies because you compare today with a memory of better times, forgetting that even those times had moments of sadness or confusion. Depression often deepens because you imagine every possible negative outcome, forgetting that the future is unpredictable and filled with possibilities you cannot yet see. The Stoics taught that the past should be a lesson, not a prison, and the future should be a direction, not a threat. The only place you can actually live is the present. To reconnect with the present, you must slow down, sit with yourself without judgment, observe your thoughts without absorbing them, accept your feelings without trying to run from them, breathe intentionally, feel your body, feel your environment, feel this moment. This moment is real, this moment is manageable, this moment is enough. The mind becomes calm when it learns that it doesn't have to solve the entire past or predict the entire future. It only has to be here, now. And this moment, no matter how imperfect, is always less frightening than the stories your mind creates. The Stoics believed that peace is not something you find. It is something you return to. It lives inside you whenever your mind stops wandering and comes home to the present. When you learn to stay in the now, even for a few seconds at a time, your emotional world changes slowly but profoundly. Loneliness becomes a quiet space rather than a punishment. Depression becomes a passing cloud rather than a storm that defines your life. You begin to see that suffering intensifies when you mentally leave the moment you are actually living. And here is the ultimate Stoic truth. You can survive this moment. You might not know how to survive tomorrow. You might not know how to fix your future. You might not know how to process your past. But you can survive this moment. And if you can survive this moment, you can survive the next. And if you string enough present moments together, you find yourself healing without even noticing when it started. Life becomes bearable not when it becomes perfect, but when you return your mind to the only place it can truly exist, the present moment. This is where strength is built. This is where clarity is found. This is where loneliness becomes softer. This is where depression loosens its hold. This is where you begin to rise again. Your power lives here, in this breath, in this moment, in this now. 11. Learn to detach from what you cannot control. This is how you free yourself from invisible emotional chains. One of the deepest reasons loneliness and depression become unbearable is because you attach your peace, your worth, and your identity to things you cannot control. You attach your happiness to people, hoping they will stay, understand you, appreciate you, choose you. You attach your stability to circumstances, hoping life will go exactly the way you imagined. You attach your meaning to outcomes, believing that victory will heal you and failure will define you. You attach your self-worth to external validation, expecting others to give you the reassurance you should be giving yourself. And when any of these things fall apart, as they eventually do, your mind collapses with them. The Stoics understood that attachment is the root of emotional suffering, especially attachments to things outside your influence. The more tightly you cling to what is not yours to control, the more fragile your emotional world becomes. Loneliness often comes from an attachment to people who are no longer present. You hold on to old memories, old versions of relationships, old expectations of how things should have been, and by doing so, you keep your mind living in the past. Depression often comes from attachment to outcomes that did not happen, dreams that didn't unfold, or plans that fell apart unexpectedly. When you cling to these attachments, you weigh your mind down with emotional burdens it was never meant to carry. The Stoics taught that detachment is not coldness, it is freedom. It is not indifference, it is clarity. It is not giving up on life, it is giving up on the illusion that you can control everything in life. To detach, you must first understand what belongs to you and what never did. Your choices belong to you, your thoughts belong to you, your actions belong to you, your character belongs to you, your inner life belongs to you. But the behavior of others, the outcomes of your efforts, the flow of life, the timing of events, the decisions of fate, none of these are in your hands. When you attach your emotions to these external forces, you place your peace in a world that shifts constantly. This is like building a house on sand. The foundation collapses with the first wave. The Stoics believed that a person who knows what is theirs to control walks through life with a calm mind, even when things are difficult. They do not fall apart when someone leaves, because they know they cannot control who stays. They do not lose themselves when their plans fail, because they know they can control their effort, but not the results. They do not drown in loneliness, because they understand that their inner life is stronger than their external circumstances. They do not collapse under disappointment, because they trust their resilience more than they fear their suffering. Depression often feels like a loss of control. Your emotions take over, your thoughts spiral, your energy declines. But even in those moments, the Stoics taught that there is always something you can influence, even if it is just your next breath, your next thought, or the smallest action you can take. When you detach from the belief that you must control everything at once, and instead focus on controlling only what is in front of you, the emotional heaviness begins to lighten. Detachment does not mean you stop caring. It means you stop breaking yourself over what you cannot change. It means you stop giving your mental and emotional energy to situations that do not respond to your effort. It means you stop expecting life to follow your script. When you practice detachment, you take your power back from all the places where you have scattered it. People, memories, regrets, fears, timelines, expectations. You reclaim it and bring it back home to your inner self. Loneliness becomes less painful when you detach from the idea that people owe you permanent presence. Depression becomes less destructive when you detach from the belief that your worth depends on achievement, approval, or perfection. Your mind becomes calmer when you detach from the thought that your life must unfold exactly the way you planned in order for it to be meaningful. Detach from expectations, because expectations are the silent killers of peace. The more rigid your expectations, the more disappointed you become. The Stoics taught that expectations create unnecessary suffering because they set you up to fight with reality. Reality always wins that fight. When people do not behave the way you expected, you suffer. When life does not move at the pace you expected, you suffer. When situations do not unfold the way you imagined, you suffer. Detachment allows you to adapt, not break. Detach from outcomes, because the moment you attach your happiness to results, you give up your freedom. Results depend on many factors outside your control. You can give your best effort and still not get what you want. You can love deeply and still lose relationships. You can work hard and still face setbacks. You can plan carefully and still encounter chaos. Detachment from outcomes allows you to give your full effort without destroying yourself when life changes direction. Detach from the past, because the past is no longer something you can influence. You can revisit the memories, but you cannot rewrite them. You can reflect on the mistakes, but you cannot undo them. You can feel the loss, but you cannot resurrect what is gone. When you attach your identity to past pain, you imprison yourself in a time that no longer exists. The Stoics believed that the past should teach you, not trap you. Detach from the future, because the future is undefined. It is not yours yet. Most of your fear comes from imagining versions of the future that may never happen. Your mind exaggerates what could go wrong and minimizes what could go right. This fear paralyzes you. But detachment from the future means understanding that you cannot live tomorrow today. You can prepare for it, but you cannot control it. You can direct your actions, but you cannot force outcomes. When you detach from the pressure of controlling the future, your anxiety softens, because your mind returns to the present where life is manageable. Detachment also means letting go of emotional dependency. Many people feel lonely because they have attached their sense of worth to someone else's attention. They believe they are only valuable when someone loves them, only meaningful when someone chooses them, only complete when someone stays. But this attachment creates vulnerability, not the healthy kind, but the destructive kind that cripples your sense of self. When the person pulls away, your identity crumbles with them. The Stoics taught that love should be shared freely, but never depended upon for survival. When your self-worth becomes self-generated, loneliness loses its power over you. Another form of attachment the Stoics warned against is attachment to your own thoughts, especially negative ones. You believe your fearful thoughts. You believe your hopeless thoughts. You believe your anxious thoughts. You believe your depressive thoughts. You attach to them as if they are absolute truth. But they are not truth. They are mental weather. They come, they go, they rise, they fall. Detachment means observing your thoughts without merging with them. When you detach from your thoughts, they stop controlling your emotions. They lose their ability to define your identity. To truly detach, you must practice the art of letting things be what they are. Let people be who they choose to be. Let situations unfold without forcing them. Let emotions come and go without clinging to them. Let life move in its natural direction without demanding that it obey you. When you detach in this way, something incredible happens. Your mind becomes light. Your chest feels less tight. Your decisions become clearer. Your emotions become more stable. You stop resisting life, and because of that, life stops hurting as much. The Stoics believed that detachment is not escape, it's acceptance. It is the acceptance that life is bigger than your plans, that people are unpredictable, that outcomes are uncertain, and that your peace cannot depend on the shifting nature of the world. When you detach from what you cannot control, you anchor your life in what you can control. And that anchor gives you stability, no matter how chaotic the world around you becomes. Detachment turns loneliness into reflection. It turns depression into a temporary state rather than a permanent identity. It turns emotional storms into teachers rather than tormentors. It turns suffering into strength. Most importantly, it returns your power to where it always belonged inside you. 12. Find meaning in your suffering, because pain without purpose breaks you, but pain with purpose builds you. When loneliness or depression enters your life, the suffering feels unbearable not only because of the emotional weight, but because it feels meaningless. Human beings can endure an enormous amount of pain as long as they understand why they're enduring it. But when the suffering feels pointless, random, unfair, or empty, it becomes heavier than your mind can carry. The Stoics understood this deeply. They knew that the difference between crushing suffering and transformative suffering is the presence of meaning. When you cannot see meaning in your pain, your spirit collapses. But when you learn to extract meaning from your suffering, your spirit rises. You become resilient. You become unbreakable. You become mentally invincible. Meaning does not remove pain. It transforms it. It gives your suffering a direction, a purpose, a reason to exist. It turns emotional wounds into sources of strength. It turns loneliness into reflection. It turns depression into self-understanding. It turns the darkest moments of your life into the moments that shaped you the most. The Stoics believed that suffering becomes a teacher the moment you stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and start asking, "What is this trying to teach me?" When you feel lonely, instead of seeing your loneliness as something that is destroying you, you can begin to see it as something that is showing you where your emotional foundations need strengthening. Loneliness teaches you about emotional independence. It teaches you how to enjoy your own company. It teaches you where you have placed your worth outside yourself. It teaches you how much of your identity you have attached to others. When you begin to see loneliness as a guide, not a curse, its weight becomes lighter. Not because the loneliness disappears immediately, but because it now has a purpose. Depression, too, can reveal truths that comfort never will. When depression slows you down, it often does so because a part of your life needs attention. Something is out of alignment. Something within you is exhausted, ignored, unexpressed, or wounded. Depression often shows up when your inner world is trying to tell you something that you've been avoiding. It may be encouraging you to rest, to heal, to let go, to confront something painful, to change a part of your life, to stop running. When you begin to ask, "What is this heaviness trying to show me?" depression becomes less like a punishment and more like a message. The Stoics believed that suffering is neutral until the mind assigns it meaning. Two people can experience the same heartbreak, the same loss, the same failure, yet one becomes destroyed by it, while the other becomes wiser, stronger, and more understanding. The difference is not the event, but the meaning each person chooses to attach to it. Without meaning, pain becomes a weight that pulls you under. With meaning, pain becomes a weight that strengthens your character, like a muscle trained through resistance. Finding meaning in suffering does not require grand discoveries or philosophical conclusions. Sometimes the meaning is simple. Sometimes it is small. Sometimes the meaning is that you are learning patience because life is forcing you to slow down. Sometimes the meaning is that you are developing emotional independence because life removed people you once leaned on. Sometimes the meaning is that you are becoming more resilient because life introduced struggles you never expected. Sometimes the meaning is that you are learning to rebuild yourself without depending on the world around you. The Stoics believed that suffering often reveals the truth about who you are. You discover your hidden strengths, your unseen courage, your inner stability. When everything is going well, you do not learn much about yourself. Comfort hides your weaknesses. Comfort masks your patterns. Comfort gives you the illusion that your mind is strong, but suffering exposes everything. It shows you what you fear. It shows you what you avoid. It shows you where you are emotionally fragile. It shows you what you value. It shows you who you love. It shows you who you are beneath all your roles and identities. And once you see the truth, you can grow. Meaning in suffering also comes from responsibility. The Stoics taught that you cannot control what happens to you, but you are fully responsible for how you respond to it. When you respond with avoidance, your suffering grows. When you respond with blame, your suffering grows. When you respond with self-hate, your suffering becomes unbearable. But when you respond with curiosity, courage, patience, and intention, your suffering becomes manageable. It becomes a challenge you can rise to meet. It becomes a fire that shapes you instead of burning you. Meaning also comes from understanding that everything you are experiencing right now is a part of your becoming. Every strong person you admire was shaped by moments when they felt weak. Every wise person was shaped by moments of confusion. Every emotionally stable person was shaped by moments of chaos. Every confident person was shaped by moments of insecurity. Growth does not come from comfort. Growth is born in discomfort. But only if you allow the discomfort to teach you. When you choose to extract meaning from suffering, you stop seeing yourself as a victim of life and begin to see yourself as an evolving, growing human being who is being prepared for something greater. This shift in perspective is subtle but transformative. Your suffering loses its power to paralyze you because you now see it as part of a bigger story, your story. Meaning also emerges when you realize that your suffering increases your capacity to empathize with others. The pain you are experiencing now may one day allow you to comfort someone else who feels lost. The loneliness you feel now may one day help you understand someone else's isolation. The depression you battled may one day become your source of wisdom, compassion, and strength. The Stoics believed that suffering connects us to humanity because it reminds us that we all struggle, we all break, we all heal. What you endure today may one day become the reason someone else feels less alone. Meaning can also come from simply surviving. There is purpose in enduring. There is purpose in not giving up. There is purpose in holding on while you wait for the emotional storm to pass. The Stoics believed that surviving suffering is itself a form of meaning. Not all pain needs to be understood intellectually. Sometimes the meaning is simply that you stayed alive, that you continued, that you endured despite everything trying to break you. Survival is a victory, even if it doesn't feel like one. At a deeper level, meaning also comes from recognizing that suffering forces you inward. It pushes you to examine your life, your choices, your beliefs, your relationships, your patterns. It forces you to confront the parts of yourself that you have been hiding. Most people do not engage in deep self-reflection when life is easy. They reflect when life becomes painful. They question their identity when their heart breaks. They question their path when their plans fail. They question their values when their suffering grows. Pain forces you to ask questions that comfort never will. And these questions can lead to profound transformation if you allow them to. Meaning can also come from recognizing impermanence. Suffering teaches you that everything in life is temporary: joy, sadness, loneliness, connection, clarity, confusion. When you embrace this truth, you stop clinging desperately to what is fading. You stop fearing what has not arrived. You stop resisting the natural flow of your life. Meaning comes from understanding that every emotion, good or bad, is part of your experience as a human being. None of it is wasted. The Stoics believed that suffering is not something to escape, but something to face with courage. When you face your suffering, instead of running from it, you build a kind of mental armor, not armor that closes your heart, but armor that protects your peace, armor that gives you emotional stability, armor that keeps your mind calm even when the world around you is chaotic, armor that allows you to walk through life with quiet confidence, armor that gives you the strength to say, "This hurts, but it will not break me." The ultimate meaning in suffering is this: it becomes the bridge between who you were and who you are becoming. You cannot become stronger without resistance. You cannot become wiser without confusion. You cannot become calmer without chaos. You cannot become compassionate without pain. You cannot become emotionally stable without emotional storms. Suffering shapes your character from the inside out. You may not see the meaning today. You may not understand why you are going through this. You may feel lost, confused, and overwhelmed. But meaning does not always appear immediately. Sometimes meaning reveals itself only when the suffering has passed. Sometimes you look back months later and realize the pain changed you in ways you couldn't see before. Sometimes you only understand the purpose once you've grown through it. The Stoics trusted the process of life, even when they didn't understand it. They believed that every struggle had a lesson, every loss had wisdom, every emotional storm had a message. They believed that pain was not given to punish you, but to prepare you. And this is the truth you must hold close. You are not suffering for nothing. You are not hurting for no reason. You are not breaking without purpose. This moment is shaping you, strengthening you, guiding you, and refining you. The meaning may not be clear now, but it is unfolding inside you slowly, quietly, powerfully. Your suffering is not the end of your story. It is the chapter that transforms you. 13. Build an inner life so strong that no loneliness can break you. Your relationship with yourself determines every other emotion you experience. There is a truth the Stoics understood that many people spend their entire lives avoiding. The quality of your inner life determines the quality of your entire emotional world. If your inner life is weak, neglected, or dependent on external validation, then loneliness hits harder, depression feels deeper, and every difficulty becomes overwhelming. But if your inner life is strong, if you have cultivated a deep, stable, trusting relationship with yourself, then no amount of solitude can destroy you, no emotional storm can shake you, and no external event can take away your peace. This is perhaps one of the most powerful Stoic remedies of all, learning to become a home to yourself. Loneliness often becomes unbearable, not because you are physically alone, but because you feel emotionally empty inside. You feel disconnected from your own thoughts, unable to comfort yourself, unable to rely on yourself, unable to find peace in your own company. You begin depending on the world around you to give you meaning, stability, confidence, validation, or direction. When those things are missing, you collapse. This collapse is not caused by loneliness. It is caused by a fragile inner foundation. The Stoics believed that a person who is anchored internally cannot be shaken easily. They understood that the strongest human being is the one who needs the least from the outside world. But how do you build an inner life so strong that no loneliness can break you? How do you become someone who feels whole, even in moments of isolation? How do you develop a sense of self that is unshakable? You begin by spending time with yourself intentionally, not fearfully. Most people avoid being alone because they fear the thoughts that surface when the world becomes quiet. When you sit with yourself without distractions, no noise, no social media, no people, no stimulation, your mind reveals everything you've been ignoring: insecurities, regrets, unprocessed emotions, unresolved conflicts, fears you pushed aside, dreams you abandoned, wounds you never healed. This is why loneliness feels painful. It forces you to confront the parts of yourself you've been avoiding. But the Stoics believe that running from those parts is what keeps you weak. Facing them is what makes you strong. To build a powerful inner life, you must learn to listen to yourself, not just the loud thoughts, but the quiet ones, the ones hidden beneath the noise. When you listen deeply, you begin to understand your emotional patterns. You begin to see why you react the way you do. You begin to understand what triggers your loneliness, what fuels your depression, what creates your anxiety. You begin to take responsibility for your own mind instead of blaming the world or waiting for someone else to fix you. The Stoics believed that self-awareness is the foundation of emotional freedom. When you understand yourself, you stop being afraid of yourself. Another part of building an inner life is learning to enjoy your own company. This does not mean sitting alone in misery. It means finding activities, habits, rituals, and practices that nourish your spirit. It means discovering what makes you feel alive without needing anyone else to create that feeling for you. Maybe it's reading, writing, learning, walking, meditating, listening to enlightening content, creating art, exploring ideas, or simply sitting quietly with your own thoughts. When you enjoy your own company, loneliness loses its power. You begin to see solitude not as emptiness but as freedom. Freedom to think, to reflect, to grow, to breathe, to exist without performing for anyone. The Stoics also taught that your inner life grows stronger when you learn to comfort yourself instead of waiting for others to comfort you. When you're hurting, your first instinct is to reach outward to friends, partners, family, distractions. But external comfort is temporary. When the person leaves or the distraction fades, the pain returns. But when you become your own source of comfort, when you learn how to speak to yourself gently, patiently, wisely, you become emotionally self-sufficient. You no longer fear being alone because you know how to support yourself. Comforting yourself does not mean lying to yourself or pretending everything is fine. It means acknowledging your emotions with compassion. It means speaking to yourself the way you would speak to someone you deeply care about. It means reminding yourself that you have survived every painful moment so far, and you will survive this one too. It means giving yourself encouragement instead of criticism, patience instead of pressure, understanding instead of judgment. This kind of inner dialogue becomes a shield that protects you during emotional storms. Another essential part of building a strong inner life is developing personal discipline. Discipline is not about forcing yourself to do difficult things just for the sake of suffering. It is about proving to yourself that you can rely on your own actions. Every disciplined act, waking up on time, cleaning your space, keeping your promises to yourself, controlling your impulses, maintaining routine builds trust in your own character. And when you trust yourself, you feel less alone, because no matter what happens around you, you know you can depend on the one person who will always be with you, yourself. When your inner life strengthens, your external life becomes easier. Relationships become healthier because you no longer depend on others to fill your emptiness. Decisions become clearer because you are guided by inner wisdom, not fear or desperation. Loneliness becomes manageable because you are not battling it with an empty heart. Depression loses its grip because your identity becomes rooted in something deeper than your emotional fluctuations. The Stoics believed that a person who cultivates a powerful inner world becomes untouchable, not cold, not detached, but deeply grounded. Their emotions still exist, but they no longer drown in them. Their struggles still come, but they face them with strength instead of panic. Their loneliness still appears, but it does not break them. It becomes a place where they grow even more. When you build an inner life, you begin to transform the way you experience every emotion. Loneliness becomes introspection. Depression becomes reflection. Pain becomes wisdom. Silence becomes peace. Solitude becomes strength. You stop seeking meaning outside yourself because you begin finding it within. The more connected you are to yourself, the less desperate you become for connection with others. The more you understand your own mind, the less you fear emotional storms. The more you enjoy your own presence, the less loneliness can harm you. The more you trust yourself, the less external validation matters. The more you comfort yourself, the less you rely on the world to soothe you. The more you discipline yourself, the more stable your inner world becomes. The Stoics believed that the ultimate form of strength is inner self-sufficiency, a confidence rooted in your soul, not in the approval or presence of others. When this strength grows, your emotional world transforms. You become the type of person who can sit alone without feeling abandoned, who can be quiet without feeling empty, who can face uncertainty without feeling terrified, who can experience sadness without losing yourself. Your inner life becomes your refuge, your anchor, your source of power. And once you reach that level of self-connection, you realize something profound. You are not alone because you are with yourself. And that relationship, the one you have with your own mind, heart, and spirit, will shape every other relationship you have in life. This is how you build an inner foundation so strong that nothing from the outside world can collapse it. This is how you rise above loneliness. This is how you overcome depression. This is how you transform suffering into strength. This is how you become mentally invincible. 14. Stop identifying with your emotions. You are the observer, not the storm inside you. One of the most silent and destructive mistakes people make when they feel lonely or depressed is that they begin to identify with their emotions. They don't just feel sad, they believe they are sadness. They don't just feel lonely, they begin to believe loneliness is part of their identity. They don't just feel lost, they begin to believe they are permanently broken. This fusion between who you are and what you feel is one of the fastest ways to deepen suffering. And it is something the Stoics warned against more than anything else. Your emotions are temporary visitors. They rise, stay for a while, and eventually leave. But when you mistake a temporary emotional state for a permanent identity, you imprison yourself inside your own mind. You tell yourself stories like, "I'm always depressed," "I'm just a lonely person," "I'm weak," "I can't handle life," "I'll always be this way." And those stories become chains that restrict every movement of your inner world. The truth is, emotions come and go, but you remain. You survive every emotional storm you've ever experienced. You outlast every moment of sadness. You endure every wave of loneliness. You stay, even when everything inside you feels like it's falling apart. The Stoics believed that suffering multiplies when you attach your identity to your emotions. They taught that your emotions are like weather patterns, sometimes calm, sometimes stormy. But the deeper, truer part of you is the sky beneath the weather. The sky does not disappear when the clouds gather. It does not collapse when storms pass through. It remains. And so do you. When you understand this, your emotions stop defining you, and instead, they become experiences you move through. This shift in understanding is one of the most powerful remedies for loneliness and depression. Loneliness becomes painful when you believe, "I am alone because no one wants me," instead of, "I am feeling loneliness today, and this feeling will pass." Depression becomes unbearable when you tell yourself, "I am broken," instead of, "I am experiencing depressive thoughts right now, and they are not who I am." The minute you create distance between yourself and your emotions, something begins to change. Your suffering softens. Your mind becomes clearer. The emotions lose their power to define your identity. You go from drowning in your emotions to watching them from the shore. The Stoics practiced emotional separation through a technique called objective observation. They trained themselves to look at their thoughts and emotions as if they were watching someone else experience them. When they felt fear, they would say, "A feeling of fear is present," not, "I am afraid." When they felt sadness, they would say, "A wave of sadness is passing through me," not, "I am sadness." When they felt loneliness, they would say, "Loneliness is visiting," not, "I am alone forever." This language matters because language shapes identity. Identity shapes thoughts. Thoughts shape emotions. And emotions shape your entire experience of life. Imagine two people experiencing the exact same loneliness. One says, "I am alone," and sinks deeper into despair. The other says, "I am feeling loneliness today," and immediately creates mental space to breathe. The situation is the same. The feeling is the same. The difference is the story. Stoicism teaches that the story you attach to an emotion determines how heavy that emotion becomes. Loneliness becomes lighter when you stop telling yourself that it defines you. Depression becomes less suffocating when you stop believing it will last forever. Emotional storms become survivable when you understand that they are temporary weather patterns passing through the landscape of your mind. You are not the rain, you are not the thunder, you are not the wind, you are the landscape beneath it all. But emotional separation does not happen automatically. It requires awareness, it requires practice, it requires patience. Most people live their entire lives reacting to their emotions as if they are absolute truth. They believe every fearful thought, They merge with every heavy feeling. They assume that every negative emotion tells them something true about who they are. This is why loneliness leads to self-criticism. This is why depression leads to self-blame. But your emotions are not truth, they are signals. They are not judgments, they are experiences. They are not identity, they are visitors. One of the most important Stoic teachings is, you cannot control the arrival of an emotion, but you can control the relationship you have with it. You cannot stop loneliness from appearing. You cannot stop sadness from rising. You cannot stop depressive thoughts from drifting through your mind. But you can refuse to merge with them. You can refuse to let them define you. You can refuse to let them shape your identity. The more distance you create between your emotions and your sense of self, the less power they have to control your life. The Stoics believed that self-mastery begins with self-awareness. You must learn to observe your emotions the same way you observe the weather. When rain falls, you do not panic. You do not assume it will rain forever. You do not take it personally. You simply understand that rain is happening right now, and eventually it will stop. When you feel lonely, remind yourself, loneliness is happening right now. When you feel depressed, say, depressive thoughts are visiting right now. When you feel overwhelmed, say, overwhelm is present. This shift in language creates a shift in power. When you name an emotion, you frame it. When you frame it, you shrink it. When you shrink it, you weaken its control. Emotional separation gives you the ability to respond wisely instead of reacting blindly. Another powerful Stoic practice is understanding that emotions do not require immediate action. You do not need to fix loneliness the moment you feel it. You do not need to fix depression the moment it appears. You do not need to solve sadness instantly. Emotions often pass on their own when you stop feeding them with fear. Your mind becomes calmer when it realizes it does not have to solve everything instantly. When you detach from the urgency to fix the feeling softens. Emotional separation also means recognizing that your emotions are not moral judgments. Feeling lonely does not mean you are unlovable. Feeling depressed does not mean you are weak. Feeling confused does not mean you are broken. Feelings are not evidence. They are experiences. The Stoics believed that the biggest lie the mind tells during emotional suffering is, this emotion defines you. But emotions do not define you. Your response does. When you learn to separate who you are from what you feel, you begin to see yourself more clearly. You begin to understand your strength. You begin to trust your resilience. You begin to recognize that your identity is much deeper than your current emotional state. You start seeing your emotions as passing visitors instead of permanent residents. Another dimension of Stoic emotional separation is understanding that your thoughts are not commands, they are suggestions. Just because your mind says, "No one cares about me," does not mean it is true. Just because your mind says, "I'll always be alone," does not mean it is your destiny. Just because your mind says, "I'm not strong enough," does not mean you lack strength. The Stoics believed that the mind produces thoughts automatically, but you choose which thoughts to believe. You choose which thoughts to feed. You choose which thoughts to allow into your identity. When you separate your identity from your emotional reactions, you gain a remarkable advantage: clarity. You begin to see the emotion for what it is, instead of being blinded by it. Loneliness becomes an experience you observe, instead of a sentence placed on your soul. Depression becomes a state of mind you navigate instead of a label you carry. Emotional pain becomes something you move through, not something you become. Emotional separation does not deny your feelings. It gives you mastery over them. It allows you to feel deeply without drowning. It allows you to experience sadness without becoming sadness. It allows you to experience fear without becoming fear. It allows you to experience loneliness without believing it is your identity. This is the heart of Stoic emotional wisdom. You are not your emotions. You are the one who witnesses them. You are the sky, not the storm. When you embrace this truth, the storms inside you lose their power. The emotions stop controlling your narrative. Your mind stops collapsing under its own weight. You rise above your suffering, not by escaping it, but by seeing yourself as something greater than the pain. This is how you reclaim your inner strength. This is how you break the patterns that keep you trapped. This is how you overcome loneliness and depression at the deepest level. This is how you become emotionally unshakable. 15. Build inner stability, because when your mind becomes solid, no loneliness or depression can shake you. There is a core Stoic truth that many people never learn until suffering forces them to. The strength of your life depends on the stability of your inner world. If your inner world is fragile, then every hardship becomes a crisis. Every disappointment becomes a collapse. Every moment of loneliness becomes unbearable. Every wave of depression becomes a threat to your identity. But if your inner world is stable, if your mind has structure, resilience, and groundedness, then even the most painful moments cannot destroy you. This is what the Stoics called inner fortitude, the unshakable mental foundation that keeps you standing when everything around you falls apart. Most people live with unstable inner worlds without even realizing it. Their emotions swing wildly based on what is happening outside. Their sense of worth rises and falls depending on who approves of them. Their peace depends on how smoothly life is going. Their happiness relies on the presence of certain people. Their confidence relies on success. Their identity relies on external labels. When you depend on the external world for internal stability, you become emotionally fragile. Life becomes unpredictable because anything outside your control can take away your peace. The Stoics knew that true strength begins inside you, not outside you. It begins with how you think, how you interpret events, how you manage your emotions, how you respond to difficulty, how you anchor yourself when the world becomes uncertain. When your inner world is stable, loneliness does not break you. It becomes a space to reflect. Depression does not define you. It becomes a signal to adjust your inner habits. Stress does not overwhelm you. It becomes a challenge to navigate, not a threat to your identity. Inner stability is not something you inherit. It is something you build, slowly, intentionally, patiently. And the first step is understanding what instability looks like inside your mind. Instability appears when you believe your emotions are uncontrollable, when you believe sadness is a flood that will drown you, when you believe loneliness is a punishment, when you believe depression is a permanent identity, when you believe every negative thought is true. The Stoics taught that emotional instability comes from the mind's tendency to overreact, exaggerate, catastrophize, and misinterpret. Most suffering begins not with events, but with the stories the mind creates around those events. Inner stability begins when you learn to question your thoughts instead of obeying them. Just because your mind tells you something does not make it real. Just because an emotion feels heavy does not mean it is permanent. Just because you feel lost does not mean you have no direction. When you begin challenging the mind's automatic reactions, you create the space necessary for stability. The Stoics believed that the mind becomes stable when it learns to separate perception from reality. Reality is usually simple. Your perception is what amplifies or distorts it. For example, someone not messaging you back is a neutral event. Your mind turns it into, "They don't care about me. I'm unwanted. I'm invisible," or "I'm not enough." The emotion of loneliness does not come from the event, it comes from the interpretation. When your interpretations become more grounded, your emotional world becomes more stable. Inner stability also comes from routine. Most people underestimate the power of small, consistent habits because they seem too simple to matter. But the Stoics understood that a structured life creates a structured mind. When your days have rhythm, your emotions have less space to spiral. When your mornings have purpose, your mind feels anchored. When your evenings have intention, your thoughts settle. Loneliness feels heavier when your life feels chaotic. Depression feels deeper when your days feel empty. Routine is not about productivity, it is about emotional safety. Another pillar of inner stability is learning to regulate your nervous system. When you feel overwhelmed, your body enters survival mode. Your heart races, your breathing becomes shallow, your thoughts accelerate, your decisions become reactive. The Stoics practiced deep breathing and grounding techniques long before modern psychology discovered their benefits. They knew that a calm body leads to a calm mind. Stability is impossible when your body is constantly in fight or flight mode. When you learn to calm your body, you regain control of your internal state. Inner stability also comes from emotional acceptance. When you resist your emotions, they become stronger. When you try to force them to disappear, they cling more tightly. When you tell yourself, "I shouldn't feel this way," you add shame on top of suffering. Acceptance means allowing the emotion to exist without letting it define you. It means saying, "Sadness is present, but I am still here. Loneliness is here, but I am still capable. Depression is heavy, but I am still breathing." Acceptance creates stability because it reduces inner conflict. You are no longer fighting yourself. Another key to inner stability is learning to create internal anchors. Anchors are beliefs, values, and principles that remain steady no matter what happens around you. The Stoics anchored themselves in principles like courage, patience, self-control, wisdom, and virtue. When life became chaotic, these principles reminded them of who they were. Without inner anchors, you drift emotionally. You get pulled in every direction by every thought, every emotion, every fear, every situation. But when you have inner anchors, you become difficult to shake. One of the most powerful anchors the Stoics used was the belief that you can handle whatever comes, not because life is easy, but because you are adaptable. You are resilient. You have survived every challenge so far. When you anchor yourself in the belief that you are capable, your mind becomes stable even in uncertainty. Inner stability also comes from living in alignment with your values. Most loneliness comes not from the absence of people, but from the absence of alignment. When your actions conflict with your values, you feel disconnected from yourself. When your lifestyle does not reflect who you want to be, you feel empty. When you betray your own boundaries or desires, you feel unfulfilled. The Stoics believed that inner peace arises when your life aligns with your principles. The more your actions reflect your highest values, the more stable your inner world becomes. Another element of inner stability is detaching from outcomes. When you believe that your emotional well-being depends on getting the results you want, you become fragile. You fear failure. You fear uncertainty. You fear loss. The Stoics taught that you should focus intensely on effort and release your attachment to outcomes. When you commit to your actions but surrender your need for control, your mind becomes unshakable. You stop collapsing when things don't go your way. You adapt instead of breaking. You respond instead of reacting. Inner stability also requires trusting yourself. Many people crumble emotionally because they lack self-trust. They don't believe in their ability to handle pain, navigate uncertainty, or survive loneliness. They doubt themselves constantly. They avoid challenges because they fear failure. They stay in unhealthy situations because they don't trust themselves to choose better. But self-trust is built the same way any trust is built, through consistency. When you keep your promises to yourself, even small ones, you begin to trust your own strength. And as your self-trust grows, so does your inner stability. The Stoics believed that a strong mind is built the same way a strong body is, through stress, recovery, discipline, and repetition. You become mentally stable by facing challenges, not avoiding them. When you face discomfort directly, you grow. When you push through difficult emotions, you develop resilience. When you survive loneliness without trying to escape it, you deepen your emotional endurance. Inner stability is built through lived experience, not theory. Inner stability also comes from simplifying your life. Emotional chaos grows in environments filled with clutter, confusion, noise, and overstimulation. The Stoics practiced simplicity not as a punishment, but as clarity. When you remove unnecessary distractions, your mind becomes quieter. When you simplify your goals, your thoughts become clearer. When you remove people who constantly drain you, your emotional load becomes lighter. Stability thrives in simplicity because simplicity reduces emotional noise. Another crucial part of inner stability is learning to live in the present moment. The past destabilizes you with regret. The future destabilizes you with fear. The present moment is where emotional safety exists. The Stoics practiced presence relentlessly because they knew a wandering mind is an unstable mind. Loneliness becomes heavier when you compare today to yesterday. Depression becomes stronger when you fear tomorrow. Stability comes from grounding your mind in the now, where life is manageable. Finally, inner stability comes from accepting that life will always contain suffering. This acceptance is not pessimistic, it is liberating. When you stop expecting life to be free of pain, you stop being shocked by it. When you stop demanding perfect happiness, you stop feeling broken for experiencing sadness. When you accept that uncertainty is part of life, you stop collapsing every time the path changes. This acceptance gives you emotional flexibility, and emotional flexibility is one of the highest forms of inner strength. The Stoics understood that a stable mind does not emerge by accident. It emerges through conscious cultivation. It emerges through reflection, discipline, acceptance, detachment, presence, and values. It emerges through facing suffering instead of hiding from it. It emerges through knowing yourself instead of avoiding yourself. And once you build this inner stability, everything changes. Loneliness becomes less frightening because you enjoy your own company. Depression becomes less overwhelming because you trust your resilience. Emotional storms become less destructive because you have built an inner foundation too solid to collapse. This is how you become unshakable. This is how you rise above suffering. This is how you become your strongest self. This is how you create an inner life so stable that nothing from loneliness to depression can ever break you again. 16. Practice radical self-honesty. Because you cannot heal a life you keep lying to yourself about. One of the most overlooked causes of emotional suffering, especially loneliness and depression, is the quiet habit of lying to yourself. Not the obvious lies, but the subtle ones. The lies you tell yourself to avoid pain. The lies you believe to escape responsibility. The lies that make you feel better momentarily, but trap you in long-term suffering. The Stoics understood that self-deception is one of the most dangerous forms of suffering because it keeps you stuck in patterns you refuse to acknowledge, emotions you refuse to face, and truths you refuse to see. They believe that radical self-honesty is the foundation of emotional freedom because you cannot heal a life you continue to distort. Many people sink deeper into loneliness, not because they're truly alone, but because they refuse to acknowledge the real reasons behind their emotional disconnection. They tell themselves, "No one understands me," when the truth is that they have not allowed anyone to understand them. They tell themselves, "People always leave," when the truth is that they push people away before they get close. They tell themselves, "Nobody cares," when the truth is they have ignored the people who do. They tell themselves, "I'm alone because of them," when the truth is that loneliness often reflects unresolved wounds, avoidance, or emotional walls. In the same way, depression deepens when you avoid the truths that could set you free. You tell yourself, "I can't change," when the truth is you're afraid to start. You tell yourself, "My life is hopeless," when the truth is you've stopped taking small actions. You tell yourself, "Nothing works," when the truth is you haven't stayed consistent long enough. You tell yourself, "I'm broken," when the truth is you're overwhelmed, not incapable. You tell yourself, "Life is too hard," when the truth is you've let your mind believe every negative thought without questioning it. The Stoics believed that the first step toward strength is seeing yourself clearly without exaggeration, without denial, without distortion, without excuses. Radical self-honesty does not mean shaming yourself. It means understanding the truth with compassion. It is not about tearing yourself down. It is about seeing what is real so you can finally fix it. Self-deception is comforting. It protects you from immediate pain. It keeps you from facing uncomfortable truths about your habits, your fears, your insecurities, your choices, your patterns, and your responsibilities. But what protects you in the short term destroys you in the long term. Lies soothe the mind today but poison the soul tomorrow. The Stoics would rather endure the discomfort of truth than the suffering of illusion. Radical self-honesty means looking at your loneliness and asking, what part of this is caused by external circumstances, and what part is caused by my own avoidance? It means looking at your depression and asking, what am I not acknowledging about my life that needs to change? It means looking at your emotional patterns and asking, what wounds am I carrying that I refuse to confront? It means looking at your habits and asking, What daily choices are contributing to my suffering? This level of introspection is not easy. It requires humility. It requires courage. It requires maturity. But the moment you commit to truth, healing begins. The Stoics believed that clarity is power. When you see yourself clearly, you stop living in confusion. When you understand your patterns, you stop repeating them. When you recognize your fears, you stop being controlled by them. When you acknowledge your weaknesses, you can strengthen them. When you accept your mistakes, you can correct them. When you face your emotions honestly, you stop being overwhelmed by them. Radical self-honesty also requires acknowledging the ways you contribute to your own suffering. It requires admitting that some of your loneliness comes from expecting others to do the emotional work for you, that some of your depression comes from avoiding responsibility for your own mind, that some of your stress comes from refusing to set boundaries, that some of your exhaustion comes from saying yes when you should say no, that some of your anxiety comes from trying to control what is not yours to control. This truth is difficult, but it is liberating because it empowers you. If you can admit your role in your suffering, you can change it. The Stoics never believed that external events were the main source of suffering. They believed that your interpretation, your habits, your beliefs, your reactions, and your inner narratives shape your emotional world far more than the world itself. Radical self-honesty is the process of discovering these narratives and replacing them with truth. Another aspect of self-honesty is admitting where you have been hiding. Loneliness becomes deeper when you hide parts of yourself from the world. Depression becomes heavier when you bury emotions that need expression. The Stoics encouraged people to confront uncomfortable truths such as, I avoid connection because I fear rejection. I isolate myself because vulnerability terrifies me. I distract myself because silence reveals the truths I don't want to face. I numb myself because feeling deeply scares me. I don't try because failure would confirm what I fear about myself. These truths are painful, but they are the doorway to transformation. Radical self-honesty also means acknowledging your strength. Many people lie to themselves not by exaggerating their strengths but by denying them. They tell themselves they are weak when they are actually resilient. They tell themselves they are incapable when they have survived things that would break others. They tell themselves they have no courage when they have endured storms silently. They tell themselves they are unworthy when they have given love, loyalty, compassion, and effort, even when it wasn't returned. Self-honesty is not only about facing painful truths, it is also about recognizing your quiet strength. The Stoics believed that true humility is not self-deprecation, it is accurate self-assessment. Knowing your flaws and owning your strengths, seeing where you need growth and acknowledging how far you've already come, accepting that you are imperfect and knowing that you are still capable. Radical self-honesty also shifts the nature of your loneliness. You begin to see that loneliness is often a signal that you have drifted away from your true self, that the distance you feel from the world is actually the distance you feel within yourself, that the emptiness inside comes from ignored dreams, abandoned desires, suppressed emotions, or a life that no longer reflects who you are. When you face the truth, you begin to reconnect with yourself. And when you reconnect with yourself, loneliness softens because you are no longer a stranger to your own soul. Radical self-honesty also transforms depression. Depression often grows in the shadows, in the unspoken, unexamined, unacknowledged parts of yourself. When you bring truth into these shadows, the heaviness begins to lift. You realize that you are not depressed because you are weak, but because you have been carrying emotional weight without support. You realize that you are not broken, but exhausted. You realize that your sadness is not a flaw, but a signal. You realize that your numbness is not failure, but a protective response. You realize that your hopelessness is not reality, but the voice of an overwhelmed mind. Truth gives depression less space to hide. Another part of radical self-honesty is admitting the dreams you abandoned out of fear. Many people feel depressed, not because life is meaningless, but because they've stopped pursuing what once gave them meaning. They've betrayed their own potential. They've silenced their own desires. They've lived according to expectations instead of authenticity. The Stoics believed that living out of alignment with your true nature creates inner suffering, and the only way out is to be honest about what you want without shame, without hesitation, without apology. Radical self-honesty means admitting what you desire, what you fear, what you avoid, what you need, what you regret, what you grieve, what you love, what you dream, what you cannot continue tolerating. These truths liberate you from emotional stagnation, but here is where Stoicism becomes truly transformative. Self-honesty must always be paired with self-compassion. Truth without compassion destroys you. Compassion without truth deludes you. Together they heal you. When you are radically honest with yourself, you reclaim your power. You stop blaming others. You stop waiting for someone else to save you. You stop living in illusions. You stop giving your mind excuses to remain in suffering. You face life directly, clearly, courageously, and in doing so, you rise. The Stoics believed that self-honesty is the foundation of wisdom. A person who lies to themselves is forever lost in their own illusions. A person who faces the truth becomes unstoppable. And this is the ultimate lesson. When you choose truth, even when it's painful, you choose freedom. When you choose freedom, even when it requires effort, you choose growth. When you choose growth, even when it is uncomfortable, you choose transformation. Radical self-honesty does not just heal loneliness and depression, it transforms the way you move through life. It transforms the way you understand yourself. It transforms the way you respond to suffering. It transforms the way you reclaim your inner strength. It transforms you. This is how you become the kind of person the Stoics admired: grounded, aware, emotionally strong, mentally sharp, spiritually aligned, and capable of walking through life with clarity, courage, and inner peace. If there is one truth that echoes through every Stoic remedy you've learned, from acceptance to presence, to self-honesty, to inner stability, to detachment, to meaning, to rebuilding your life through small steps, it is this: your healing begins the moment you choose to return to yourself. Loneliness and depression are not signs that you are weak, broken, or incapable. They are signals that something deep inside you has been neglected for too long. They are invitations from your inner world asking you to slow down, to listen, to reflect, and to reclaim what you have lost within yourself. The Stoics never promised a life free of suffering. They understood that every human being, no matter how strong, how wise, or how successful, experiences moments of heaviness, isolation, doubt, and sadness. They taught that suffering is not a failure. It is part of the human experience. What matters is not whether you face these emotions, but how you face them, whether you are destroyed by them or shaped by them. whether you run from them or learn from them, whether you allow them to paralyze you or allow them to mature you. Everything you have read in these lessons points toward one ultimate truth. You are far stronger than the storm you are facing. You may not feel strong every day. You may not feel confident. You may not feel hopeful. You may not feel clear. But strength is not a feeling, it is a decision to rise again, a decision to move even when you feel stuck, a decision to take one step even when the path is dark, a decision to trust that you are capable even when your mind whispers otherwise. The Stoics believed that strength is built quietly, in the unseen moments when you get out of bed, even though your heart feels heavy, when you take a small action, even though you feel hopeless, when you choose to face your thoughts instead of escaping them, when you choose to observe your emotions instead of identifying with them, when you choose to accept what you cannot control instead of fighting against it, when you choose to tell yourself the truth, even when the truth is uncomfortable. These small decisions are what transform your life from the inside out. Loneliness becomes less painful when you stop fighting it and start understanding it. Depression becomes less suffocating when you stop running from it and start listening to what it's trying to tell you. Your emotions are not here to destroy you. They are here to guide you back to yourself. Every painful emotion has a root, and the moment you acknowledge that root, it begins to loosen its grip. The moment you accept your emotions without judgment, they begin to move. The moment you stop treating yourself as an enemy, you begin to heal. Every remedy you've learned teaches you a different way to reclaim your power. You accept your feelings so they stop controlling you. You detach from what you cannot control so your mind stops collapsing. You reconnect with the present moment so your suffering doesn't grow from memory or imagination. You rebuild through small actions so your strength returns even when motivation is gone. You create inner stability so that no external chaos can shake you. You stop identifying with emotions so that they no longer define you. You find meaning in your suffering so your pain becomes a teacher, not a prison. You build a deep relationship with yourself so loneliness transforms into self-discovery. You practice radical honesty so illusions stop blinding you and clarity becomes possible. Each of these steps is a return to your mind, your truth, your inner world, your potential, your power. And maybe this is the most important realization of all. You were never as weak as you felt during your darkest moments. You were exhausted. You were overwhelmed. You were carrying too much without support. You were fighting emotional battles silently. You were surviving experiences your past self was not prepared for. But weak? No. A weak person does not continue. A weak person does not search for healing. A weak person does not reflect. A weak person does not grow. Only the strong look for remedies. Only the strong face themselves. Only the strong walk through suffering with the hope of finding wisdom. The Stoics believed that every struggle has two outcomes. It can break you, or it can build you. It can shrink you, or it can expand you. It can close your heart, or it can deepen your understanding. It can weaken your identity, or it can strengthen your character. It can trap you in the past, or it can awaken you to your future. And now, with everything you've learned, you get to choose which path your suffering will take. You are not meant to stay lost. You are not meant to stay stuck. You are not meant to stay lonely. You are not meant to stay depressed. You are not meant to stay disconnected from yourself. Everything you've been feeling is part of the process of becoming more aware, more grounded, more stable, more present, more honest, more resilient, and more connected to your true self. The Stoics taught that the greatest victory a person can achieve is mastery over their inner world, not mastery over life, because life will always contain unpredictability, but mastery over your response to life. And once you master your inner world, nothing outside you can take away your peace. This conclusion is not the end of your journey. It is the beginning of a different relationship with yourself, the beginning of a new understanding of your emotions, the beginning of a life where you respond instead of react, the beginning of a life where you act from clarity instead of fear, the beginning of a life where you rely on your inner world instead of external validation, the beginning of a life where you grow stronger instead of sinking deeper, the beginning of a life where suffering becomes your teacher instead of your enemy. Remember this: you are not your loneliness. You are not your depression. You are not your fears. You are not your mistakes. You are not your past. You are the one who rises through all of them. You are the one who observes them. You are the one who survives them. You are the one who transforms because of them. And now, with the wisdom of these Stoic remedies, you are the one who will move forward with more strength, more clarity, more courage, and more inner peace than you have ever known before. Your healing has already begun. Your transformation is already unfolding. Your power is already returning. Your mind is already rising. And your future, the calm, grounded, strong, unshakable version of you, is waiting. Step into it. You're ready.